there's always something that needs a little fixing on Farpoint Farms.
Hey guys, it's Eric here at Farpoint Restorations. Today we are finishing up pretty much the work that we're going to be doing on the Beetle. There's not a lot left, but one of the things that I had intended to do, and just because of finances wasn't able to do when I did the engine rebuild, was I want to replace this 009 distributor with a, I wanted a electronic ignition, so I wanted something that was pointsless, but I also wanted something that had the original vacuum advance, because these came with that. If you're going to go with a stock engine, and this is fairly stock, 50cc over stock, and I'm using a stock carburetor, the 009s have a flat spot. They tend to have a dead spot close to idle, so it can be a little bit unnerving, really, if you're going up the hill or something like that from a stop, because it kind of wants to stumble a bit before taking off. I have replaced the cap and rotor on this thing with brand new Bosch parts. I do recommend when you do any ignition replacement parts on these that you always try to use original Bosch parts on that. So I'm going to set those aside and use it, even though the kit that I have, and I got a Pertronics flamethrower. I think that's how Pertronics is pronounced. These have been around for a long time, and they're good quality. I also got the pointsless ignition that has the vacuum advance. So I'll kind of be returning this to a modern version of stock. Now, wiring this thing up is super easy. So a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to go to electronic ignition. It's going to cause some kind of major wiring nightmare, but it's not. The original distributor has a single wire going to this side, the plus side. This has two wires, and all you're doing is hooking one to each side of the coil. So you're literally only adding one extra wire. You will notice that it comes with a lot longer than what is needed. So you just trim that off, and you'll see that they knew you were going to do that. So they don't even put any ends on it, but they are kind enough to include two ends. So you will need a pair of wire cutters and a crimp tool for that. Other than that, this is fairly much like a stock distributor would be. It does have this piece right here, and as we get into this, I'll show you what's going on. When we remove the old distributor, you'll see that this piece right here is slotted, but it's also offset. So it will only go in one way. Now, when you go to install it, go ahead and remove your cap and your rotor. Well, you can leave the rotor on there, and that'll help you as far as getting it lined up, because as you can see, you kind of like wiggle it into place and then push down. It does come with a new O-ring here. Put a little oil around this, and when we get it in there, we'll do that. Now, because mine didn't initially have vacuum advance, I will have to remove one plug here and run a little vacuum line down, and I'll show you when we get there to that. But to get the old distributor out, we're only going to need two tools. That is a 10 millimeter and a 13 millimeter. There is a 10 millimeter here. If we loosen that up, that's how we make adjustments on our distributor. If we take the 13 millimeter down here, that's what holds the distributor to the engine block. So both those will loosen the 10 and remove the 13, slide that up, and you got to be careful that nothing falls down into the engine, or you have just cost yourself a whole lot of hours or trouble. We'll get that out, and we will clean the area up just a little bit, put a little oil on that, and put it in. I'm going to move the camera a little closer in so you can see it, and when we're done, I will also show you how to set timing. Do not be alarmed if when you get this thing back in and you have set your initial timing, static timing, if the car doesn't run. In the case of this, I had to make serious adjustments to the carburetor just to get it to run. I know my timing wasn't great before, and so I would imagine that I'll crank it over and it'll either run very poorly or not at all, and I'll have to make some adjustments to the carburetor to get it idle. Also, if you have to turn the carburetor or the distributor back and forth a little bit at the beginning to get it to run, that's okay, because we're going to use a timing light, if you have one, to set the final timing, and I'll show you how to go through that as well. I hope you're enjoying this series on the Beetle. We're almost done. It's crazy, man. I've been working on this for the last couple months, rebuilding the engine, putting a new alternator on, rebuilding the carburetor. I mean, it just went on and on and on, but we're down to it. I have a little bit of work to do on the sound system, probably going to install a CB on it. And I am going to redo one of the seats, not the upholstery, but the padding underneath is rotted out, and I think maybe the springs are broken. I'll do that. I am not going to take you along for that journey because I'm no professional. I'm going to be just making it so it's comfortable for me. Okay, I do have a timed pulley here. If you don't, you're just going to have to line it up with the notch. There is a notch. You're going to line it up with the case halves here, but I do want to rotate this thing around until I get to TDC number one, so I'm going to do that. There we go, top dead center on this one, and you know, the distributor placement when you're done with this mess probably will not be the same, but for right now we're lining up our top dead center just to give us a good starting point. Now we know where to install our new unit as a base, right? Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is loosen up the 10 here. Don't want to remove that nut, just loosen it up, right? And that's going to allow us to have kind of free movement here in a few minutes. There we go, that should be enough. And as you can see, we can now, if we try hard enough anyway, we can rotate this, okay? And then I'll switch that out for the 13. There is a nut, and this is where you got to be careful because there is a washer back here as well. If that washer were to fall into the engine when you were doing this job, you would have a major catastrophe on your hands. So while you can't see what I'm doing, just be aware. There's our nut. Now I'm going to grab a magnet and get that washer out so I don't have to worry about it falling in. And there it is. Don't let that 10-cent washer destroy an engine, okay guys? Okay, once that's out, you should be able to just lift up, and it's in there, right? And it's coming. And that's just 30 or 40 years worth of grime, you know. This one's 50 years old. I did not remove the distributor when I rebuilt the engine, so that's probably been in there a long time. And lastly, I'll undo this wire right here. Okay, before we put our new distributor on, we do need to wiggle this baby off right here, our clamp. I'm just gonna take that and slide it down off the old one. When you put this on the new one, the O-ring that's there, it's gonna be difficult to slide it over. Don't tear the O-ring, so if you need to spread it with a screwdriver or something right there, you can certainly do that. But I'm gonna do that. I do recommend getting our distributor into this hole as quickly as possible. It reduces the chance of something that you don't want falling into it. So I'm gonna wipe this down and slide it onto the new, all right, here's our new distributor. Go ahead and slide this back on. And again, it's gonna kind of stick on that, but we gotta wiggle it past, hopefully without damaging it. If you do damage it, you might wanna replace that before you reinstall it because that's what's keeping the oil from pouring up out of here. Okay. And now, I'm going to take just a little bit of oil here and lubricate that area there so that it both slides down in but also lubricates that seal, because again, we could rip that seal going back in. We don't want to do that. So I'll do that right there, put a little on the ends here, and we're ready to reinstall it. It's the job is not difficult at all, but what the job is you know, retiming your engine. So that's going to be the part that probably takes the longest. Wiring and such is not that difficult on this, which is a good thing. And there we go. And now she's locked in. Oh, is it? Now she's locked in. So you're wanting to squeeze that down. And again, it's very hard to see because of the way that it's set up, but even if I had the camera facing straight down, you just want to make sure your clamp, your bottom piece here, goes back down over the stud that's hanging out there, or you'll have a hard time getting this lined up. But now we are ready, that quickly we are ready, to go ahead, and I'm going to put my washer back down on there. I'm going to kind of set this out of the way for a second. Slide my washer back on there first, and you can completely tighten that bracket there. You don't need to leave that loose. Only this stays loose. And you can see there's a drastic difference in the timing of the vacuum advance units and the non-vacuum advance units. The positioning of the distributor rotor button will be very off, very different than what you're used to. So if you take it off and you're like, well, wait a minute, maybe this is the wrong part. It's not, it's just, again, it's very, very different. Okay, that's on there. All right, like I said, this is the stuff that comes with Pertronics is not bad quality, but it's not Bosch. I do recommend any Volkswagen application you use OEM parts. So I've got new cap rotor wires. I'm going to swap the rotor over, and then before we put this part back on, there we go. We're going to want to do that. So we are now ready to put this cap back on. There's a little piece here that, see how it locks in? It's not, again, like see how I'm wiggling that back and forth, and it's latched, right? So I'll leave that there, slide that on. I got my coil wire here, and before I go any farther with any of this stuff, I'll just lay those off to the side. I want to hook up my vacuum line, so I'm going to go ahead and remove my vacuum nipple here that's been keeping that from leaking. And I'm going to find a vacuum line, and the original vacuum line does have a loop in it, because occasionally instead of vacuum you might have gasoline, and they don't want the gas getting onto this diaphragm here that's inside of this. So a little loop will help keep the gas from getting all the way down here, and it will also give it time to evaporate so that it never makes its way down there. Let me do that. All right, after poking around a bit, I did find some leftovers from some previous project I don't actually remember, but we're gonna go ahead and snake that up in there, and it should fit on there. Yeah, fits on there nicely, and we'll give it a little loop. Wow, it's almost the right length too. Heck, I don't think I need to trim it. Yeah, that's actually about perfect. Isn't that something? Okay, now if you want to reroute it or whatever, you certainly can. I'm just gonna leave it there because it's kind of gonna be out of the way. I like that. Okay, cool. All right, so next up is these wires here. I've got my ground and my hot. I'm gonna trim them because clearly I don't need them to be all that long. I guess I'll probably cut them right about there. So let's go ahead and do that. And here are the little pieces that they give you. If you end up screwing one up, it's not a good idea, it's not a bad idea, I should say, to have a few of these on hand. This is also a really great tool. It's a Valco 1900 is the brand. But you can get these under about 100,000 different names. But it's a crimper. This side cuts, that side crimps, and they're really, really handy. So I'll go ahead and you install it like so. And then you crimp it off. Give it a squeeze, move up a little bit, give it another squeeze. Usually that'll hold it. If it doesn't, and you do want to give it like the pull test here. I don't want to tug on that thing and make sure that that's not going to fall off while I'm driving down the road. And again, that's why it's good to have some spare crimpers or spare stuff laying around. Gonna make sure that she's good. Okay, I've gone ahead and reinstalled my wires. I've got those set up, and it's time to install the wires for this. Now, the green wire where the condenser once was, that green line that came off the old condenser, that's where our negative ground is going to go for this. So the black wire here, if I can hold on to it, is going to go right there. If I can get it on there, there we go. And our red wire, and I've got to figure something out here because I don't have any available tabs, but our red wire goes on there. So I've got to, let it give me a second here to figure that one out, because what we have here is our feed wire, and then we have our choke wire, and then we have this other wire, which I'm not sure what that wire is, but yeah, so give me a second to figure that out. But I need my red wire needs to go right there, so that's where it's going to go, and then we're ready to start this thing up and make our final adjustments with the timing light. All right, and here's where things get weird for this particular car. All three of my my prongs on this side, the plus side, are already in use. So what I'm going to do for right now, and I'll make a connection to splice that in at some point. That's your reverse light on a 74. And it's not necessary for what we're doing. So right now I will just go ahead and unplug it and use this and plug the red into that. So now I've got my incoming hot, I've got my coil wire, or I'm sorry, my choke wire still hooked up, and now I have my Pertronics wire hooked up as well. So I am ready. That's all there was to it. I've got everything else hooked back up, which is nice. And we're ready to give it a shot. We're gonna find out just how bad this is. I have to move this outside or I will soon suffocate. So I'm gonna put it outside. Hopefully you'll be able to see as much as you did inside, outside. And then I push it out the door. I'll hook up my timing light, and we're ready to make our final adjustments. When replacing this, especially this, when I set my timing, I have to pinch that vacuum line off. I don't wanna just unplug it because then I'm creating a vacuum leak. That's gonna mess with stuff. So I'm going to crimp it off, just going to pinch it off using a pair of channel locks, or vice grips I should say. I'll make my adjustments. Highly likely that what worked before will not work now, so I'll need to make some adjustments for idle set screws, stuff like that. So let's do it. All right, final prep before starting it up. We're going to hook up our timing light, and I've got a small bladed screwdriver here, flat blade, to make adjustments to the carburetor as needed. So what I'm going to do is hook this up. Some of your timing lights are going to have arrows pointing to and fro. This one does not, so it doesn't really matter which way you hook it up. Some people say it's better to have it all the way at the spark plug. You can do that. Heck, you know what? Just for the fun of it, I will do that today. But if for some reason you don't have access or can't just get to it or whatnot, it's alright. You'll be alright. It'll be alright. I doubt the timing is that much different from one end of that spark plug to another, considering it's all traveling really fast. I mean, it's moving, right? Positive is right here, so I'll go ahead and hook to that. And negative is anywhere you have a good ground. I'm going to hook right there, and that's going to be my ground. Now, we are ready to make our adjustment. I've got to crimp off that vacuum line, and then we're ready to make our adjustment. The timing for this, with a timing light, pinch this off, rev it up to 3,500 RPM. You're going to want it to be a total of 30 degrees on this particular model, so the 30 should line up right there. And let's hope it does. Well, my friends, that's it. As you can see, adjusting the timing to a maximum of 30 brought it pretty much where I thought it would, which is about 7 to 8 before top dead center at idle with the vacuum blocked off. I've got a little bit of tuning left to do on this carburetor. I need to get jets. They're actually on order. I'm at a high altitude, and for every 1,000 feet of altitude, there are some additional adjustments that you should make to your Beetle. And so maybe I'll take you along for that, maybe not, because honestly the car runs and drives fine. I've put about 600 miles on it. But I think some of the little stumble that I still have coming off of idle is related to the main jet and the secondary idle jet. And so I'm going to be upsizing both those. Plus, and this is something I might get into in another video, 10% ethanol changes the stoichiometric fuel to air mixture on these vehicles. Any carbureted vehicle has no way to make those type of adjustments. If you can afford to run ethanol free, that's ideal. If not, like me, well, idle jets and main jet replacement for a stronger fuel mix is probably where you want to be. I hope this helped you out, and until next time, my friends, take care.